Hello and welcome to this week's episode of QTV. Wow, have we got a fantastic program coming up tonight.
We'll be chatting to former Melbourne Queer Film Festival director Lisa Daniel and just finding out what she's up to nowadays.
We'll head up to Canberra for the Lesbian and Gay Archives Conference, part of the Spring Out Festival Fund.
Anglican's Cleary talks about some of the shenanigans and the politics inside the Anglican Church.
And in our Moments in Time series, the Salon, a 1970s social venture bringing radical gay libbers and conservative camp people together.
Had an arts degree, had a master's degree, so I was at uni for about, it was probably about 10 years altogether. I had a postgraduate degree in media, but just didn't really have any kind of focus or just sort of floating around a bit really. Doing a bit of writing for film journals here and there, but nothing that was terribly useful or paying me much. I was working in hospitality still. I worked at the same hospitality venue for about 15 years. And I didn't even know what it was. I'd been to a couple of sessions and thought it was terrible and thought, well, what is this job? And I went to an interview at the then President Susie Goodman's house. It wasn't really a job interview. We just sort of chatted about the festival and I wanted to know, what does this job entail? They explained a bit about the curatorial and the management side and I thought, well, let's just give this a crack for a year and see what happens. The festival did quite well in its first year under me and just stayed another 16 years. I loved it and there was a lot of pressure to stay from the board because we kept improving the festival year after year. But eventually I felt like I was running out of ideas. It's pretty unusual not to get sacked from that sort of job, so I like to pride myself on the fact that I decided to leave. I gave them about a year's notice.
Thanks, Dano, for all your extraordinary hard work and persistence and passion towards the festival. I don't think people realise just how hard you've worked.
Claire was the president of the Queer Film Festival. I thought she was a bit of a Brighton mum, which was hilarious. And she was really an unpaid employee for years. Like the amount of work that Claire did for the festival is absolutely extraordinary. Probably saved the festival hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of wages and all that sort of stuff. She really taught me how to do the job. So we both sort of stumbled through the first festival. It was clear that there was a bond between Claire and I, and we got together and it was quite serious quite quickly. We decided to buy a house together. We bought a house in Elwood. About 10 years in, we bought a property down on the peninsula in Balnarring, 10 acres. We started building the house and she just stayed there. She never returned to Elwood to live. A show called Grand Designs Australia, which follows a build from start to finish, and we were featured on that. The token lesbians, we used to say. We broke up in 2018, halfway through 2018, which was incredibly sad, very difficult, still difficult. We were together for about 19 and a half years. I spent the first 5 years living in Noble Park with my parents, and then we moved to Mulgrave. My parents had a house built in Mulgrave in a new estate. It was called Mulgrave then, it's now called Wheelers Hill. Dad worked at the TAB, telephone betting, for most of his career, about 35 years I think. Mum was a stay-at-home mum, but she had a lot of part-time jobs. She used to make lampshades. I remember she made lampshades for years. We used to pile into the car and go to Baronia to pick up the bases of the lampshades and then take them back fully made a few weeks later. House always smelled of glue. I've got two younger sisters, Karen and Katrina. They're 3 years and then 3 years. I was the boss and I had my own room and they shared a room, so they were more thick as thieves together and I was more the independent, older sister that hopefully they looked up to. I was a bit of a prankster. I would, trick my sisters into doing all sorts of ridiculous things and terrible things like, push my middle sister outside naked and thought it was hilarious and, the sort of things you would never do now. Parents stayed married. Pretty sort of suburban existence. Mum used to have the radio on 3AW, still does actually. in every room of the house. So, you know, my politics were quite conservative. My idea of music was top 40 that I would hear on the radio, or, you know, Countdown on a Sunday night. I spent most of my time outside playing tennis, or I would be playing table tennis at home, or hitting a tennis ball against a brick wall. I wasn't one for sitting inside. I was an avid reader. I really like reading and just falling into the world of books. I really liked that. I've got a good imagination, and I had a great imagination as a kid. But I would read at night or in the morning. But as soon as you know, it was light, I'd be up and playing sport. So I was always outside, climbing trees, climbing into the cavities of newly built houses. After school, we'd kick a footy around. AFLW came way too late for me. I would have been all over that if I was a kid. Reasonably serious tennis for quite a few years. I was pretty good at it, actually. I had a bit of a tennis dad. He was pretty keen for me to make a career at it. He'd come and watch me train, and he was a bit of a yeller and a screamer, and I wasn't really into that. I didn't have the killer instinct. I liked playing, but I didn't really like scoring and beating people and that sort of thing. Maybe I'm too much of an empathetic sort of person. Like, I didn't want to go out and smash someone on the tennis court. I found Dad's pressure a bit too much, so I pretty much quit tennis at about the age of 14 and took up softball. Even though I really liked tennis and I was very good at it, I think a team sport just suited my personality a lot more than an individual sport. I ended up at uni when I was 17, which was pretty young, and I actually think I was way too young for uni. I think I would have benefited from a year off. I think getting to uni when I was 17, you know, suburban girl, pretty conservative, pretty green. You know, I would say that I was probably like today's 14-year-old. I was struggling with my sexuality, not wanting to be a lesbian, and thinking, is this what I am? I'm not going to be able to get married and have kids, but I didn't really want that anyway. I started going to pokies. I didn't really know that those places existed, and I met a friend at uni, David, who was fully into that, and he was telling me about all these places. I was like, what do you mean? What's a drag queen? And I was just so naive about the world, but really open to learning. Like, I wasn't closed-minded at all. I was like, yep, show me everything. I've always been interested in crime, and I think a lot of us are interested in crime. It's a growth area. And I decided to do a criminology degree, and I thought, well, let's just do this degree and then we'll see what happens in terms of work, because I always want to go back to work. I'm hoping to teach in the area of criminology online. Word for Word was tossed into the mix, and I thought, it'd be really interesting. But at the time, it was hosted by a guy who did a lot of interviews with mostly queer celebrities. I thought about it for a few days. I went back and I said, look, I'm interested in the concept of the show, but not celebrities. If I can talk to really interesting, let's say, ordinary people from the community, I'll do it. And they said, yep, let's do that. It came at a really good time in my life, because I was going through a really hard breakup and felt pretty sorry for myself. The breakup was a massive thing, and the loss that went with that, you know, loss of my home, you know, daily contact with my pugs, and, you know, it was a huge breakup. It was, you know, everything changed virtually overnight. Word for Word, in a lot of ways, was a bit of a saviour for me, because I was talking to people that had had some pretty incredible things happen in their lives, you know, just extraordinary challenges, and it made me think that, you know, I can get through this. If they can get through that, I can get through this. And it's been really quite inspiring, and in a lot of ways has saved me, I think, in terms of just keeping me from falling into a huge slump.
Coming up now, the Archives History Conference and all the fun of Canberra's Spring Out Festival.
Today we're here at YesFest 2019. We're really excited. This is the third year that YesFest has taken over the streets of Lonsdale and Allura Streets in Braddon here in Canberra. We started in 2017 on the night that the Marriage Equality Postal Survey results were announced. It was a spontaneous and impromptu street party down at Hopscotch, and thousands of Canberrans turned up. So we've kept the tradition going. We're really proud to be celebrating the fact that Canberra was the loudest voice for equality in the Marriage Equality Postal Survey. And today we've got dancing, celebrations, right up until 2 a.m. tonight, so we're just really excited.
We're here at the Alga History Conference. We're really excited this year to be part of Spring Out, the Canberra's Pride Festival. Academics, community members, popular historians and people from the public to think about queer history, our past and our future.
It was against the law to hang around in a public place on the off chance somebody might come by that you might proposition to have sex. And these were laws that were actively enforced, not systematically, but in sort of bursts, as the police got it into their heads that this was a problem that had to be dealt with. As late as the early 1960s, we have newspaper reports, complete with names and addresses, of men who were arrested in public places in what we would call, very clearly, examples of police entrapment.
March 1975. It's early autumn down by Lake Burley Griffin. The plane trees have just started yellowing. All around the lake, people are enjoying outdoor sculpture exhibitions, communal craft projects, and whiz-bang scientific demonstrations as the capital launches into Australia 75, a festival celebrating the creative arts and sciences that are being nurtured by the Whitlam government as the nation prepares for the 75th anniversary of Federation. There are a lot of domes. A gust of wind, a flurry of colours and shapes fills the sky beside the National Library. Surely the most visually exciting event in Canberra during Australia 75 must have been the flying of Peter Travis's kites from the lawns of the National Library, wrote Craft Australia's April Hershey. If science and art ever merged at one point, it was at the moment of liftoff. Thanks to the flamboyant theatrics of Peter Travis and his flying colour fields, one might be tempted to see Australia 75 as a high point in the cultural contributions of Australia's camp creatives. The festival could have been a watershed for queer artists, but it wasn't. But we needn't worry. Travis had already guaranteed himself a place in the gay icon pantheon when, as a recent design graduate in the early 60s, he was tasked with modernising Speedo's men's swimming costumes and came up with the legendary racer design.
The number of representations of homosexual men in early cinema is small, and the representations of lesbians even smaller. The main representation of gay men in these films was that of the sissy, an effeminate male supporting character, often a butler, designer or choreographer. They were neither the heroes nor the villains, simply the comic relief. The figure of the sissy was an accepted characterisation of a homosexual man in the early 20th century. By 1933, the appearance of sissies in films with other sexually transgressive characters and situations reached an all-time high. And it was at that point that Hollywood, alarmed at a rising chorus of calls for film censorship by US morals campaigners, decided to institute their own system of self-censorship.
And he said, you know, you and I don't have much to do with each other, and I don't think that needs to change, but there's something you need to know about me and you need to hear it from me. Basically, I'm homosexual. And I just, my jaw dropped. By that stage, I thought I was the queer in the family. The study emerges from my own experience in such a family. My late father came out at the age of 60 in the mid-90s. And it's also grounded in my own identification as queer. So it's a highly personal project, and there's a strong memoir element.
The planet does not need more successful people. What the planet desperately needs is more healers, storytellers and lovers of all kinds. The programme reads Sex, Crimes, Shocks and Scandals, the John Lee Memorial Adelaide Gay History Walk. John's research will be used as we walk back in time to visit the scenes of seduction and scandals, beats and blackmail, murder and mayhem. The walk will be led by a suitably credentialed and colourful personality, one Gertrude Glossop. Then Mrs. Gertrude Glossop, OBE, farmer's wife.
Up next is Ray Cleary, who spoke on Joy's 94.9 Saturday magazine. Then we'll remember the Salon, a bold social experiment.
Being an LGBTIQ radio station, we are clearly concerned about social justice and human rights for our communities. And one of the symbolic elements of that has been marriage equality. And of course, the churches are quite vexed about this issue. And even more recently, the Anglican Church has sent out some very mixed messages. Macra and I were chatting about this earlier on. And at one hand, you've got the Archbishop of Sydney, and is that what they're called, an Archbishop? The Archbishop of Sydney saying that everyone is welcome to our church.
No, specifically that LGBTIQ folk are welcome in church, but if you don't accept the church's view on marriage, then you should leave.
There you go.
And also, comments about trans folk, about honouring, and I'm paraphrasing here, honouring the gender that God gave you. So I'm interested, Ray, I acknowledge that Anglicare and other, religious-based care organisations are probably much, much further down the road in terms of acceptance and acknowledgement of a whole range of issues that are going to be important to our listeners. Yet the church, the official position of the church, and please don't be offended, I see it as rank hypocrisy. Because the question I want to ask you is, Tass and I are both gay men. Are we God's work?
Well, I would answer by saying simply yes.
So
it's not an issue for me.
No, but
and I don't think it's an issue for many church people, and particularly many Anglicans. I mean, I know many, both men and women, who would claim themselves gay and either live in a relationship or don't live in a relationship. So I think that the everyday life experiences of parishes, if you like, differs very greatly from the so-called pronouncements by Archbishop Glenn Davies and the other bishops. I think one of the challenges for the so-called institutional church as such is its history and the way in which the church is formed. I mean, the church has always been very slow at responding to many social issues. And that can be traced back, I think, to the fact that it's got a 2,000-year tradition, and it's very difficult to unravel that tradition, I think, in a generation or two generations.
It took, for women to be ordained about 40 years. It took the Anglican Church 58 years to change its position on slavery.
Yes.
I understand nothing happens quickly.
The Anglican Church is not like the Roman Catholic Church. There's not a magisterium in the Anglican Church where everything in Rome centres on Rome. The Anglican Church is a much devolved communion, and each diocese is, in a sense, really independent in its own right. So each diocese can make a different decision about a whole range of issues, which they tend from time to time to do. And so in the Anglican Church, we are in communion with Canterbury, but Canterbury doesn't tell us what to do.
Right.
So each diocese, so therefore you get these divisions occurring where you can have the Diocese of Sydney saying, no, we oppose civil unions, we oppose same-sex marriage, we oppose blessings of same-sex marriages. You can get Wangaratta and Newcastle to say something else. and then they all goes to a tribunal, and it'll take about 3 years before the processes work out. That's the dynamics of how it works.
So there's no divine intervention?
Divine intervention, well, yes, well...
So it's a little bit like a parliament, really,
It
isn't
is
it?
like a parliament.
So you've got
really.
the representatives of each of those electorates, so to speak, who come together.
Crossbench.
And a lot of crossbench. But I think you need to remember that there's another agenda going on with the Diocese of Sydney. They regard themselves as the pure Anglican Church. The rest of us are renegades and we don't agree, etc. I think there's an agenda behind all this for Sydney, is that they want to, I believe, long-term secede from the Anglican Church of Australia.
So it's a franchise dispute.
There's a franchise thing going on
so the
at
split.
the same time. And it's important for them to identify themselves as the true Anglican Church, because if they don't, they lose their investments, their properties.
In the 1950s and 60s, camp life in Australia tended to be organised around private parties. In public, there were a few places that would accept or at least tolerate the presence of discreet and well-behaved camp people. In the 1970s, gay liberation erupted, which had a very different attitude to the world and wanted to be seen and to make sure that the world saw what it was doing and who gay people were. This involved demonstrations and protests and other acts of visibility. The two milieus, the old camp world and the new gay one, remained pretty much estranged, separated by a lack of understanding and sometimes indeed mutual hostility. One of the few attempts to bridge the gap was an organisation called the Salon, which was founded at Melbourne University, but not amongst the undergraduates, but rather at Trinity College. The Salon was very much a gentleman's club, all male, admission by membership, and prone to kind of swishy and very private parties of their own. As a result of this, it was dismissed by many liberationists as elitist and even reactionary. But that is in fact not really what it was trying to do at all. The people who founded Salon were interested in trying to bring gay people into the wider world, but in a social way, but also a visible way. And this was rather new. It was trying to build, in fact, what we might later have called a gay community. It set out to do this by bringing representatives of the various organisations together for shared social events. It had a very professional attitude to social organising. Social groups, they thought, should have membership and constitution. They should aim to be renting or even better, buying their own premises so that they had a permanent presence in the world. The purpose of all this was not to make profits, which was the point, of course, of the emerging gay clubs, but rather to bring people together, to construct a culture for gay people. Its annual picnics were quite successful at this. They brought together representatives of the social and commercial scene in a way that started to achieve what it was that the Salon had hoped to do, to build a new gay community.
Wasn't it great to look at the groundbreaking work that was being done by the Salon back in the 70s that really was the front runner to the social scene we have for the Q+ community here today?
Absolutely.
A
Wonderful.
really great piece of work, and also a groundbreaking person in Lisa Daniel making the Melbourne Queer Film Festival really quite the success story that we know it as today as well. So some great content today on QTV. But join us again next week. We'll have more great archive and information for you about the Q+ community. Good evening.
Bye for now.